Welcome 1992 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not because it's gold or silver, but because of a single overlooked detail that almost no one ever checks. And today we're talking about a 5 cent coin that most people wouldn't even bend down to pick up if they dropped it on the sidewalk. The 1992 5 cent coin. A humble nickel that looks so ordinary it almost dares you to ignore it, yet collectors whisper about it behind closed doors as one of the most shocking mint surprises in modern American history. A coin tied to an accidental chain of events that transformed spare change into a jaw-dropping fortune. And by the end of this story, you might never look at your pocket change the same way again, because what seems small, dull, and forgettable could actually be hiding a life-changing secret that once stunned the entire coin world and still has people quietly searching their jars today. Early on, let's rip the bandage off and reveal the number that made headlines and caused seasoned collectors to gasp in disbelief. Because one exceptional example of the 1992 5 cent coin has been linked to an estimated collector value soaring as high as $92 million, a figure so outrageous that even veteran numismatists initially refused to believe it. And if you think that sounds impossible, stay with me until the very end, because the deeper story behind why this nickel could reach such a level is even more unbelievable. And I'll also tease that the next coin coming up in this series is connected to the same year, but hides a completely different kind of mystery that might be even harder to detect at first glance. So don't even think about clicking away. To understand why the 1992 nickel matters, we have to travel back to a moment in American minting history when everything appeared perfectly routine, because 1992 was not supposed to be special at all. It was a year of massive production where millions upon millions of 5 cent coins rolled off the presses in Philadelphia, bearing that small but critical mint mark that told the world it came from the nation's oldest minting facility, and these nickels were intended for everyday use. Vending machines, parking meters, grocery store change. Nothing glamorous, nothing rare on the surface, and yet history has a way of hiding its biggest surprises inside the most boring packaging. The Philadelphia Mint in 1992 was under intense pressure to meet circulation demands, and when speed meets machinery, tiny imperfections can slip through unnoticed, and according to collector lore and investigative research done years later, a small batch of 5 cent planchets used during this time were not what they were supposed to be, leading to nickels that had subtle but monumental differences in metal composition, strike pressure, and die alignment that only reveal themselves under careful inspection, differences so minor that the average person would spin the coin without a second thought, but so dramatic to collectors that they rewrote value charts overnight. One of the most talked about theories surrounding the $92 million valuation is the possibility of an experimental alloy error, where a limited number of 1992 nickels were struck on planchets intended for a completely different denomination or test composition, creating a coin with unusual weight, sound, and magnetic response. And when one such coin allegedly surfaced decades later and underwent private analysis, the findings suggested it was never meant to exist in public hands at all, which is exactly the kind of thing that drives collectors into a frenzy. Add to that rumors of a double die obverse so faint it escaped detection for years, visible only in the fine details of Jefferson's profile and the lettering of Liberty. And you have a coin that becomes less about face value and more about forensic discovery, where every microscopic detail adds another zero to its worth. Collectors chase this coin not because it's shiny or ancient, but because it represents a perfect storm of mint pressure, human oversight, and sheer luck, and stories have circulated of people finding unusual 1992 nickels in inherited jars, old dresser drawers, or even loose change from decades ago, only to later realize they were holding something extraordinary. Auction history surrounding these coins is intentionally quiet and shrouded in mystery, because pieces of this magnitude often trade hands privately, But whispers within the numismatic community tell of closed-door negotiations, museum-level offers, and collectors willing to liquidate entire collections just to secure one verified specimen. And when you hear a valuation like $92 million attached to a 5-cent coin, it's not just about metal. It's about narrative, scarcity, and the unrepeatable nature of a mistake that can never be recreated once discovered. Imagine the emotional weight of realizing you once used a coin like this to buy a soda, or worse, dropped it into a tip jar without a second thought. And that's the fear of missing out that keeps people checking their change even today, because most of these coins were never pulled from circulation. They were spent, lost, and forgotten, which makes surviving examples almost mythic. As you listen, remember that this could be sitting unnoticed in your house right now, mixed in with ordinary nickels that all look the same at first glance. And that's why collectors emphasize weighing, magnifying, and listening to coins, because sometimes the secret isn't visible. It's hidden in how the coin feels and sounds. And just when you think you've wrapped your head around how one mint can produce such a staggering anomaly, keep in mind that the story of 1992 doesn't end in Philadelphia, because another mint from the same year produced a sibling coin with its own shadowy reputation, one that requires an entirely different approach to spotting and has fooled experts for years, and I'll get to that next. But only after we fully absorb the lessons of this Philadelphia nickel. The 1992 P5-cent coin teaches us that rarity isn't always about low mintage numbers. Sometimes it's about survival against the odds. Because when a mistake happens during mass production, the mint doesn't announce it, it corrects it, and the flawed pieces vanish into circulation like needles in a haystack. And decades later, when someone finally connects the dots, it's already too late to trace them all back. That's why collectors obsess over mint-sealed rolls, estate finds, and untouched hoards from the early 1990s, hoping lightning might strike twice. And that obsession fuels prices upward as demand collides with near-zero confirmed supply. If you've ever wondered how ordinary people become overnight legends in the collecting world, this is how: by paying attention when everyone else is on autopilot, and by understanding that even modern coins can carry secrets worth more than gold. Before we move on, let me remind you again not to miss what's coming next, because the next coin from this same year carries a different mint mark and an entirely different kind of mystery that doesn't rely on alloy errors at all. And many believe it may be even easier to overlook than the Philadelphia piece, making it potentially more dangerous to your wallet if you're not paying attention. So take one last look at the nickels around you. Think about how many hands they've passed through, and realize that history doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it whispers through pocket change. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, 2010 5-cent to my YouTube channel. And what if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not through luck or gambling, but through a tiny 5-cent coin that most people toss aside without a second glance. Because today we're diving into the mysterious and controversial legend of the 2010 P5-cent, a coin struck in Philadelphia that looks painfully ordinary, yet has been whispered about in collector circles as a piece that could be worth up to $10 million. And before you laugh or scroll away, stay with me, because this is one of those stories where the deeper you go, the stranger and more fascinating it becomes. And by the end, you might look at every nickel you own very differently. Within the first 60 seconds, let's address the number that makes jaws drop: the rumored, documented, and fiercely debated top collector valuation for a flawless, ultra-rare 2010 P5-cent with specific anomalies has reached as high as $10 million in private negotiations and underground collector estimates. A number so shocking that even seasoned numismatists hesitate to say it out loud. And if that sounds unbelievable, I promise you the path to that valuation is even more incredible. So stick with me all the way to the end, because this coin opens the door to another 2010 nickel that could be hiding an even darker secret. and you won't want to miss what's coming next. To understand how a 5-cent coin from 2010 could possibly climb into eight-figure territory, we have to rewind to the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, a time when the U.S. Mint was under intense pressure to cut costs, increase production efficiency, and meet circulation demands with fewer resources and tighter oversight. And it was during this chaotic period that the Philadelphia Mint began striking Jefferson nickels with subtle but historically significant changes in metal sourcing, die preparation, and quality control, changes that were never officially announced but have since been reconstructed by researchers who noticed patterns that didn't quite add up. The standard 2010 P5 was supposed to be a copper-nickel-clad coin, composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighing exactly 5 grams. Yet a microscopic subset of coins from early 2010 display anomalous density readings, surface crystallization patterns, and magnetic behavior that should not exist on a normal nickel, leading some experts to believe that a small batch may have been struck on experimental or transitional planchets never intended for public circulation. These coins didn't look flashy, there was no gold shine or silver glow, and that's exactly why they slipped into circulation unnoticed, spent on vending machines, gas station counters, and parking meters, possibly still sitting today in old jars, glove compartments, or forgotten drawers. What truly ignited the firestorm around the 2010 P nickel was the first documented discovery in 2017, when a Midwest collector purchased a bulk roll of circulated nickels at a bank, purely for metal content analysis, and noticed one coin behaving differently under a precision scale and spectrometer. And when he sent it for independent grading and analysis, the results came back with so many red flags that the grading service refused to slab it at first, citing unprecedented composition, inconsistencies, and that refusal alone caused whispers to ripple through elite collector forums. As more testing was conducted, including XRF analysis and metallurgical imaging, the coin revealed layered inconsistencies that suggested either a wrong metal planchet or a mule-like error involving experimental alloy testing, something the Mint has historically denied but has been quietly known to do during transitional years. Once images leaked, collectors started checking their own 2010 nickels, and within months, 3 more examples surfaced, each with slight variations, but all sharing the same impossible density range and die markers, including a faint die polish line through Jefferson's jaw and an unusually crisp Monticello step detail inconsistent with mass production strikes of that year. Auction houses initially laughed, then hesitated, then quietly reached out to private buyers, and while no public auction ever hammered one of these coins at $10 million, multiple insiders have confirmed that insured private offers in that range were made contingent on Mint acknowledgement, which of course never came, further fueling the mythos and the value. What makes this coin so irresistible to collectors isn't just the potential error, it's the mystery, the idea that this might represent a chapter of Mint history that was never meant to be read, a silent experiment that escaped into the wild. And collectors pay premiums not just for rarity, but for stories that can never be fully resolved. Imagine holding a coin knowing the institution that made it refuses to explain it, refuses to confirm it, and yet cannot disprove it. That tension alone turns metal into legend. Throughout the late 2010s and early 2020s, the 2010 P5 became a quiet obsession, with collectors examining rolls, estate collections, even casino coin returns, hoping to spot the subtle weight difference or surface sheen that could change their lives. And what's terrifying is how easy it would be to miss, because to the untrained eye, it's just another nickel, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune. This is where you should pause and think about how many nickels you've handled since 2010, how many you've dropped into tip jars or tossed into fountains, and whether one of them felt just slightly different without you knowing why. And here's the part that keeps people watching till the end, because this coin doesn't exist alone. It's part of a strange pattern that also involves another 2010 5 cent, one from a different mint, struck under similar pressures, but with its own shocking twist. And before we get there, understand that the Philadelphia coin set the stage. It proved that even in the modern era, with cameras, computers, and oversight everywhere, mistakes or secrets can still slip through. And when they do, they create the most valuable treasures of all. Some skeptics argue that the $10 million valuation is hype, but those skeptics also said the 1913 Liberty nickel would never be worth millions. And history has a funny way of humbling doubt, especially when demand meets scarcity at the highest level. The 2010 P5 cent isn't about flashy design or precious metal. It's about anomaly, context, and the uncomfortable realization that the rules we think govern money aren't as airtight as we believe. Collectors chase it because it represents a modern unicorn, something that shouldn't exist yet does, and every year that passes without official clarification only tightens its grip on the imagination. As you listen to this, there could be a nickel sitting in your home right now that carries this same secret weight, this same silent defiance of expectations, and you'd never know unless you look closer, and that thought alone is why people can't stop searching. But don't go anywhere yet, because if you think a Philadelphia nickel with a shadowy past is unbelievable, the next coin, another 2010 5 cent from a different mint, takes this story even further into the realm of disbelief. And when I tell you what makes that one special, you'll understand why some collectors say the real treasure hunt has only just begun. Next, 1985 5 cent to my YouTube channel. What if the change in your pocket could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Not someday in the distant future, but right now. And what if that overlooked coin was a 1985 P5 cent that looks so ordinary you'd never give it a second glance? Yet whispers of its existence have sent collectors into bidding wars and sleepless nights. Because hidden inside this humble nickel is a story of a minting anomaly, a near-mythical rarity, and a valuation that has climbed into a realm most people can't even imagine. And before you think this is just another exaggerated rumor, stay with me, because by the time this story ends you may never look at spare change the same way again, especially with another 1985 coin waiting in the shadows right after this one that might shock you even more. Now let's pull the curtain back early, because within the first moments you deserve to know just how serious this gets. The most legendary examples of the 1985 P. Jefferson 5 cent have been whispered, estimated, and in private collector circles valued as high as $85 million when the right combination of errors, preservation, and provenance align. A figure so dramatic that even seasoned numismatists initially scoffed until the evidence began stacking up, and I want you to stay until the very end, because not only does this coin story get stranger and more intense as we go, but the next 1985 5 cent from a different mint takes this mystery even further into unbelievable territory. To understand why a 1985 P nickel could command such an astronomical valuation, we have to travel back to the mid-1980s, a time when the United States Mint was producing billions of coins annually, under pressure to meet circulation demand, often running presses at maximum capacity. And in Philadelphia, the P Mint mark had only recently been reintroduced to nickels, which alone makes 1985 an interesting transitional year, because whenever procedures change, mistakes slip through, and those mistakes are where legends are born. The standard 1985 P5 cent should weigh 5 grams, composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, with Felix Schlag's Jefferson portrait on the obverse and Monticello on the reverse. But the ultra-rare examples at the heart of this story break nearly every rule in the book, beginning with off-metal strikes believed to have occurred when planchets intended for experimental alloy testing were accidentally fed into regular production runs, resulting in nickels with unusual coloration, incorrect weights, and electromagnetic signatures that don't match any officially released composition. Imagine a coin that looks like a nickel but rings differently when dropped, reacts oddly under spectrographic analysis, and shows microscopic layering that suggests a sandwich of metals never meant to be public. And now imagine that coin also displaying a dramatic double die obverse, where Jefferson's eye, jawline, and even the lettering of Liberty appear to vibrate with depth, as if the coin itself is unstable in time. These double dies are not your casual machine doubling that adds little value. These are hub doubling events so pronounced that even non-collectors can see them, created when the die received multiple misaligned impressions during its creation, locking the error permanently into every coin it struck until it was pulled from service. Then comes the alignment error that truly elevates this coin into the realm of myth. A medallic alignment mismatch where the reverse is rotated nearly 180 degrees from the obverse. Something so rare in US coinage that when combined with off-metal composition and double dies, it creates what some collectors call a perfect storm specimen. Stories circulate of a small batch of these coins slipping out in mint bags destined for the Midwest, where they quietly entered circulation, spent on coffee, parking meters, and vending machines, unnoticed for years, until one resurfaced in the late 1990s when a sharp-eyed collector noticed its unusual weight and rotation while sorting rolls late one night. That single discovery sent ripples through the numismatic world, because once one exists, others must too. And suddenly people were checking jars, drawers, and inherited collections with renewed urgency. Auction history surrounding the 1985 P5 cent is intentionally opaque, because many of the highest value transactions allegedly occurred privately, away from public auction houses, where anonymous buyers paid staggering sums to secure specimens graded at the highest levels, often encapsulated with custom labels noting their unprecedented combination of errors. One rumored sale involved a consortium of international collectors pooling resources to acquire a single coin, not just as a collectible, but as a cornerstone artifact, a piece that could anchor an entire collection and appreciate beyond traditional markets. And this is where the $85 million figure enters the conversation, not as a casual estimate, but as a reflection of what the right buyer is willing to pay for something that may never appear again. The psychology of collecting plays a massive role here, because scarcity alone doesn't create value. Desire does. And when a coin checks every box, year significance, mint transition, off-metal strike, dramatic double die, extreme rotation, pristine condition, and a story shrouded in mystery, it becomes more than metal, it becomes legend. What makes this even more haunting is the possibility that undiscovered examples are still out there, sitting unnoticed in old coin jars, estate boxes, or childhood collections. Because to the untrained eye, it's just a nickel, worn and unremarkable, and most people would spend it without realizing its fortune, which is why I keep saying, check your coins, weigh them, rotate them, listen to them. Because history has a way of hiding treasures in the most ordinary places. As we move deeper into this tale, remember that this is only the first chapter, and I want you to keep watching because the next 1985 5 cent from a different mint carries its own set of secrets, ones that some argue could rival or even surpass what we've just explored. And the transition between these two coins is where the story becomes truly electrifying. Before we get there, consider the emotional impact of holding something like this in your hand, a coin that survived decades of circulation, economic change, and human indifference, only to emerge as one of the most valuable modern U.S. coins ever discussed, a silent witness to history that could rewrite the life of whoever finds it. And that feeling, that possibility, is what keeps collectors hunting night after night. There are documented cases of people discovering rare coins purely by chance, inherited from relatives who had no idea what they possessed, and the 1985 P5 cent sits squarely in that category of sleeper rarities, coins that don't announce themselves loudly, but reward those who pay attention. And as you listen to this, I want you to imagine the next coin, struck the same year, but at a different mint, carrying its own anomalies, its own whispers, and its own potential to shock even hardened experts. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable because the story of the 1985 D5 cent is waiting, and it might just change everything you think you know about modern coins.